And interestingly enough, Palladium also has, it also spikes up before recessions. It did in 1999 before the 2000 recession, and it did before the 2007, 2008 financial crisis.
Hello there, my friends. Just a quick note before we get started. This coming Tuesday, February 4th at noon Eastern, I'm going to be doing a gold and silver live roundtable. Excited to be joined by Rory Hall of the Daily Coin, Phil Kennedy of Kennedy Financial, and James Anderson of SD Bullion. Again, it's going to be a live one, so we will be taking questions, anything you're wondering about gold and silver. So if you hit that little notification bell right below there next to the subscribe button, you can be notified, or you can just check in next Tuesday at noon Eastern. And with that said, here is today's episode. Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And today we have a return guest to the show who, man, I think you possibly might have had one of the most favorable responses from our audience of all the guests I've brought on here. Your knowledge comes through in the way you speak and present yourself and the things you talked about. So it was a pleasure to have you on before. Excited to have you back on now, especially as always, wild things happening in these financial markets. So Rob Kientz of goldsilverpros.com. Welcome on in, sir. And how's everything going with you today, my friend?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate coming on, and things are going very well. Gold price is up, so I'm happy.
Yeah, well, we'll see if there's a big paper drop hammering it back down tomorrow, as these things often go, but always nice to see the metals prices up. And I think something a lot of people are starting to clue in on is one of the lesser known precious metals, well, actually two of them, Palladium and rhodium, have been soaring lately.
Yes.
So would love to get your take on what's going on there, how people can understand and respond. And with that said, I'll let you take it away.
All right. So rhodium is a very interesting metal. It's used primarily in autocatalysts along with platinum and palladium, right? So it's very much an industrial metal. There's not a big derivatives market on top of it. So it tends to trade freely to the actual physical demand. And it tends to spike up right before a recession. It's almost like a very reliable recession indicator. The only recession it didn't spike up before was the tech crash in the 2000 timeframe. But during the 90s crash or the 90s recession and before 2007, 2008, it had spiked up in price. And it's almost like the canary in the coal mine, one of the precious metal canary in the coal mine. You'll see it spike up before you see gold and silver. And I think that has to do with it being such a thinly traded market and the demand for that when you're in the bubble phase of the market and there's so much demand for things that rhodium goes into, like the automotive sector, mirrors, and other things that rhodium's used for. It's also used in jewelry, very interestingly. I purchased an updated wedding band for my wife last year, and we bought a Vera Wang edition ring, which is a really nice designer ring for her. I wanted to get her something nice since we've been together for a while. And it was made of rhodium. And that's the first time I'd seen a piece of jewelry made completely from rhodium. And it was a beautiful piece. And I had no idea that the investment that we made was going to return back to us so handsomely. I can't say that I've been an expert on the rhodium market for a number of years, but yeah, I mean,
it's so profitable. Even when you're buying your wife a gift, you're making a good investment.
That's right. So I can't go wrong buying precious metals and jewelry. So yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful piece, and I've come to appreciate the rhodium market. Very, very thin market, doing very well. It does tend to crash back down, so I don't expect it to stay at its price that it's at now for very long. But you know, it's been an interesting ride watching that one kind of spike up there. And in terms of palladium, it's just been on this sort of meteoric rise since, I would say, about 2007, 2008, as I look at the chart. And interestingly enough, Palladium also has, it also spikes up before recessions. It did in 1999 before the 2000 recession, and it did before the 2007, 2008 financial crisis. So it also spikes up. And I think that's also one of these bubble precious metals because it's used in autocatalysts. Palladium is also used a lot in jewelry. It's used for white gold pieces because it's lighter than platinum, but it's more scratch resistant than platinum. So, and you know, as the world expands in this bubbleized economy that we tend to have, the palladiums and the rhodiums get used quite a bit in industry, and so those prices will spike. And they're very price inelastic, much like silver, because they're used a little bit for a lot of different applications. So the price can spike up quite a bit, and industry just continues to buy it. Interestingly, and I wrote an article on this about a year ago, I'm waiting on platinum to come back up, because platinum would be a substitute for palladium in auto catalysts and in jewelry as well. And its price has risen maybe $100 or so recently, maybe a little bit more than that, but it really hasn't spiked up yet. But I'm expecting platinum to come up as well. And I expect platinum, I don't know if it'll get to $2,400 like palladium is trading at right now, but it should get pretty close to that. I imagine they'll even out maybe somewhere 1,800 to 1,900. One thing I've been saying for the last couple of years, and not a lot of people are on board with me on this, but I think that palladium and platinum may catch a little bit of the precious metals safe haven bid if the stuff hits the fan, which I think it will, because I don't think there's going to be enough gold in private hands. And I think because silver is used so much in industry and the supplies are depleted so much that they are now, that they're not going to be as available to the public. And so people may reach out to other precious metals. I think platinum and palladium may get a little bit of monetary bid as well when the world recession really starts getting a little bit deeper. So I wouldn't be surprised. You can buy coins and bars in platinum, palladium. I bought 4 platinum bars a couple of years ago from one of the popular world mints. I forget which one, but you can also buy country coins now in platinum and palladium as well. So I think they make a really good investment. I think palladium, maybe a little bit overpriced right now for my taste, but I think platinum would be a really good buy right now.
Yeah, Robin, you mentioned a little bit, perhaps you could touch a little more on the interchangeability. I hear different things, whether you can substitute them. Could you dig into that a little bit?
Sure. So platinum's used a little bit more on the diesel end of things and catalytic converters, and palladium's used more in the gasoline engine of things. So as you can imagine, most vehicles in the world are gas and not diesel. Some of the heavy truck sector tends to focus a lot on the diesel. You can interchange them. Platinum's a little bit less efficient in gasoline motor catalytic applications, but can be used. I was reading an article from Ford that says it takes about 1.5 years to substitute one for the other in a manufacturing process. So I imagine that manufacturers right now are devising ways to substitute platinum for palladium, but there's a little bit of a lag between the time at which you can actually buy and substitute platinum in a manufacturing process and get it out there. So there's a little bit of lag of when a price will spike in one and then you see the demand for the other. But I imagine that will occur probably here in the next 6 to 8 months. You'll see more platinum being bought for catalytic conversion until the two maybe find some sort of equilibrium in price.
Yeah, especially as that spread widens. Although I'm curious, what do you think is driving? Is it because a foreshadow of a recession? I hear also that we have essentially reached perhaps the point where the metal, there's a structural shortage where, between selling the paper contracts on the COMEX, that there's this demand for palladium and you can't just flip the switch to create more out of a mine. Is that your thought on that as well?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of speculative overhang in the palladium market as well as there is in gold and silver. So I think there's some speculation driving up the price, but I also know that there are physical supply shortages, because if you look at the development of the automobile sector in China, for example, and their middle class, they're demanding a lot more palladium for automotive applications. And I think that there's only so much palladium in the world, and it comes where palladium is most found in South Africa and in Russia. There tends to be a lot of political risks, especially in South Africa. So there are a lot of supply pressures on the supply side, and I think demand is very strong. So I definitely think that palladium price probably will still be elevated for quite a while. This is something I wrote about in January 2019. It's one of the very first things I published on my website. I expect palladium price to stay strong for quite a while because of both supply and demand factors. And I think that when the stuff hits the fan and then some of those demand factors come down, perhaps we're selling less automobiles, I think it's going to catch some of that safe haven bid, because there's not going to be enough gold and silver in the world to satisfy everybody's needs.
Do you think we're headed towards that type of outcome where this possibly exposes the fractional reserve nature of these precious metals and then filters into gold and silver, or not quite the case?
I think so. I think between palladium and silver, I would say probably silver may be the one I'm looking really to sort of break the back of the paper market and the derivatives market, which I think has been over speculated in, especially to the short side. The price of silver is suppressed so much compared to the other precious metals, it's really ridiculous. So where most of the primary silver miners aren't making a profit, mining it out of the ground at $15, $16 an ounce, or maybe making just a very small profit. And that's been happening so long that we've sold so much of our silver in the market so cheaply that now it's hard to find mines to come back at that price and continue to supply the market. So the price of silver really has to come up. And I think the silver market has been so depleted because of cheap prices, suppressed prices because of the paper contracts. If you look at the paper contracts in silver, you're seeing many times the amount of silver produced in paper contracts to the short side. And what happens is that over time hammers down the price of silver, and you get more of it in market, and we end up mining so much of it so quickly that you can't find reserves across the world that will replace that silver for a cheaper price. So the price of silver has to come up. So if I'm looking at all the precious metals markets, I'm looking at the one that's going to break the suppression mechanisms in the derivative market. I would say silver first, palladium and gold probably behind that. I could see them playing a part as well, but I'm really looking for the price of silver. And I think if we get into the financial crisis, which we will, and I think we'll see the price of silver go back towards $30, $40 an ounce again, I think that's going to break the suppression using the paper derivatives markets. And I think you'll see that across the precious metal sector.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Curious if you ever heard anything to the effect that perhaps one of the reasons why silver kind of stays under that $20 mark. And again, I don't know that anyone, even these banks, might know this yet. I hear some speculate that a lot of derivatives get triggered once silver starts going between $20 and $25. Have you heard anything to that effect, or any comment on that?
I haven't heard of $20 as a derivative sort of benchmark or watermark, but it wouldn't surprise me because the price of silver has really come down off of $20 since I guess maybe about 2016, and has just stayed there for about 3 years. And it seems like every time we kind of get close to that, it gets hammered back down. And you can see that in the COMEX and in the derivatives market. So maybe that is a price point where they just don't want it to go above, because it'll cause some sort of damage. And I think when you get the financial crisis, I don't think they're going to be able to stop it. Because what we saw from 2009 through 2011, after the financial crisis, is when people demanded the precious metals, it didn't matter what happened in the paper derivatives markets, the price just went up. So when that happens again, I think that will expose whatever, the levels are in those markets, in which is sort of the point of no return for the banking participants.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all unfolds. And again, appreciate you joining me on the show to shed some light on this. Perhaps just before we wrap up, can let folks know where they can find out more about you.
Sure. You head over to goldsilverpros.com, or you can email me at robert@goldsilverpros.com. I have a free newsletter where I send out quarterly. It's called the Golden Quarterly. You can sign up for free in the upper right-hand corner, just clicking the newsletter button and putting in your email address.
Well, I appreciate that. And you actually did a great write-up on Mag Silver, which, folks, Rob's going to be back on the show in a couple of days talking about that one. So go ahead, hit the subscribe button before you head on over to goldsilverpros.com. Rob, a pleasure as always, and we'll look forward to catching up soon and talking more silver.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Chris.
So that is today's episode. I do thank you for spending some time with me and hope you enjoyed it. If so, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.